Welcome and thank you for joining us today for our 49er Industry Chat. Before we start, I want to hold tight as we welcome everyone into our webinar today. Thank you for joining us for our next edition of our 49er Industry Chat. My name is Noemi Guevara. I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement at California State University, Long Beach. Before we start, just want to remind you the session is being recorded and it will live on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. So you could view at a later time and share with fellow alumni and students. Also, I would like to remind you, we have a Q&A box located above or below your screen so that you could submit any questions to our guest speaker throughout our chat today. So now it's my honor to introduce Darrell Metzger. Darrell has served 4 decades in the tourism, leisure, and lifestyle industry. He has played an integral role in the startup and operations of global leisure, resort, and destination projects, and has held leading positions in renowned leisure destination organizations, including Disney Resort, USA, Tokyo Disneyland, Ocean Park Resort, Hong Kong, Sentosa Island Resort, Singapore, and Legoland Resort, Malaysia. He has advised and held key executive roles in major global events, including the Los Angeles Summer Olympics and in the World Expo 86 in Vancouver, Canada. In 2015, he was appointed Adjunct Professor at the Singapore Management University and focused on the creation of major destinations, its management and impact on the host economies and tourism. He served on the board of the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. Please join me in welcoming Darrell Metzger to today's 49er Industry Chat. Thank you so much, Darrell, for joining us today.
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the nice introduction too. So
you're welcome, and we look forward to learning about your career and experience throughout the whole world today. Start us off. I know we have kind of an outline, but really wanted to start off with, you came to Long Beach out of high school, maybe, or if you transferred, not sure. But what was that experience like, and what takeaways did you have from CSULB?
Well, I received my bachelor's degree from Long Beach State. I grew up in Orange County here, and all my friends really decided to go to Long Beach, and I liked it so much. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's degree, which I think is a little more than normal, but I did.
It's okay. It's average now.
In those days, I mean, that was a long time ago. It was Cal State Long Beach at the time, and it was I think the biggest university around here. It also happened to be the closest, but they had everything that my friends and I that I went to high school with would need, and also it just enabled me to commute because I was working part-time, and I found that they offered whatever I needed, and I did intend to carry on with a graduate degree, and I saw the MBA program. I had my eyes on that when I, probably as a freshman, I guess. So it turned out to be convenient. It was a good experience that I had because I could always get the classes that I wanted, and I had some good counseling there, which I needed because I was having a lot of fun too, and thus the 6 years to get my bachelor's. But the MBA came a lot quicker. I was right on schedule then, so it was a very good experience. I don't know how big the student body is now, but I'm sure it's
it's bigger. We're at over 39,000 students.
Yeah,
yes.
That is big. So very comfortable experience. It helped me. It had credibility, especially had credibility because when I was applying for positions around here, and I started work at Disneyland, in fact, the person that hired me was one of your graduates, had graduated a few years before. So
Wonderful.
good experience all around.
So in between your bachelor's and your master's, did you work part-time in your field, or it was just like a part-time to just make
and that's
because you knew you were going to go for that MBA?
Yeah, I knew I was going to go for the MBA, which, but I worked all the way through to get my bachelor's degree. And fortunately, it was in not really the leisure industry as such, but it was in the retail industry, which is part of, I mean, every resort, every leisure facility has some retail involved in it. And what I found out was the best combination is to get that degree, get the bachelor's degree, if you can, a graduate degree, and have some related experience. And the experience is not necessarily a technical experience of, say, working in retail. It's the fact you're working with people, and what you're selling in the leisure industry is really you're selling the experience that people are having. All right, and so even not now, but in later years when we'd be hiring and interviewing, we're always looking for people that had those skills. They had people skills. They had worked either part-time or full-time in some industry that was dealing with some type of providing an experience for people, because that was our product, especially at Disneyland. That was my first 10 years and really in the leisure business. And that was like boot camp. It was basic training. You never were in one place usually for more than a year, and then you're another side of the business. And what we were selling there was the total experience. And that's what I always look for in candidates. The qualifier is the degree, but you have an upper hand if you have some experience in that industry.
Going along that line, like if you could think back or even reflect now because you're retired, what skills do you recommend students, whether they're doing their undergrad or they're in the master's program, really hone on in today's world to be relevant, to enter the leisure industry or even the business world?
Well, first of all, just by way of background, I held the position as Director of Human Resources for Disney during the opening of their first international project in Tokyo. So I've had a lot of experience in hiring people. Also, even for the Olympics, I worked for the Director of Human Resources there. We hired 50,000 volunteers, so wow. a lot of people. But we found that it's the people skills that are most important. I would say for those that are listening that are in an industry now, whatever it is, I think that not just the people skills, but the ability to communicate. For me, it was as a MBA student, and then after with Disney, I enrolled. Then it was called Toastmasters or something. It was a speaking.
Oh yes.
I don't know if they still have it, to be honest.
There is.
Well, that was a tremendous benefit because it taught me to just, somebody points to you and you stand up and they give you a subject and you start talking.
Right.
And it just gives you a comfort level to kind of think on your feet. I think that's very important for somebody, especially in the leisure industry. People are coming to your facility or your hotel, and they're not coming there because you have the best, most comfortable beds or you have a great ride or something in your park. They're coming there because of they want a good experience, and that's what they're going to remember.
Wonderful. So I think Disneyland was your foot in that industry hospitality world. Why would people consider a career in this industry, and how they should go about getting their foot in the door?
Well, the reason why they should consider it is because there are a lot of good, talented people in this industry, and I will say, unfortunately, in our region, in the U.S. in particular, it's a very mature business, the leisure business. It's not that easy to get into if you're talking about entry level or middle management. It's not that easy. And so in the degree that you have, it's important for entry level, but let me tell you, once you get 4 or 5 years of experience in some part of the industry, people don't look back at what your degree was in. They look at how you handle yourself, and whether your degree was in finance or liberal arts, it doesn't matter a great deal once you get that practical experience behind you, because as an interviewer, I'm looking at you as a person, and is this person going to fit into our company, our corporate culture, et cetera. That's what's more important. I was never asked what my GPA was, thankfully, because you should be honest in an interview. And I was never asked, but that's because I had some experience. And the questions that were always asked of me was, what about this and that in your previous position? But the qualifiers were both degrees that got me the job. In fact, very honestly, the MBA got me the job at Disneyland, and that was my first real step into the industry, because it just put me in a smaller group of people to be considered. Right. And anybody listening now that is thinking about it in one of your MBA programs, or is thinking about going back to get a graduate degree, I would really recommend that, because I've been sitting on the other side of the desk interviewing those people, mm-hmm. and it does put you just in a smaller group of people.
It does. We talked before we went live about considering, people need to consider that maybe you have to live abroad and in different areas other than the United States to be in this tourism leisure industry. Can you talk a little bit about that? I know your most of your professional career has been out of the United States.
Well, I think that the key phrase you use is that some people have to live abroad. And that's a little difficult for me. When I started out, it wasn't that. It was an opportunity to move to Japan and live in Tokyo for 4 years. My son was born in Tokyo, and so we had another daughter. So our kids started school there. I mean, at a very, very young age, just preschool. But that was different. That was not something I had to do, but it's something that I looked at as an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And later on, it's where the opportunities were. And to be very blunt with the people that are listening, is the pool of talent that you have that is trained in US or European leisure industry is very small in the developing industries in Asia, Middle East, and so on. They don't have the experience that our people from US and Europe have, and so the competition is less. I'm being very blunt. There were many people that could have done my job, I think, in Singapore, where we had a $9 billion investment in an island resort, and to run that operation. There were other people, friends of mine, that could have done the same thing, but they didn't want to. They didn't even want to apply.
Oh, okay.
They didn't want to move. They didn't want to, disrupt their
put themselves out there and make that move.
Yeah, because it's not all fun stuff.
Right.
I mean, your kids move around, change schools every 4 or 5 years or so. They're in a different culture. There's a different language. There's always the language and culture issues, and some people don't want to do that. So the pool that they're selecting from, whoever that resort or company is a lot smaller. So it gives you, and it gave me, a better opportunity to get a better job that maybe I wouldn't have gotten in the U.S. because I was competing with all my friends, and
Definitely.
they were smarter than I was. So I had a problem.
Staying on the same topic of being abroad, I am getting questions, working around the world. How important was it for you to familiarize yourself with local cultures and customs prior to diving into each of your roles abroad?
Well, I didn't have an opportunity to when if you're given an opportunity to take a job in say Singapore. I mean, I flew to Singapore, interviewed for about 2 days or so, and then offered the job, and you make up your mind. You don't have much of a chance. It wasn't up to me to make the decision whether I wanted the job or not. It was up to the company, or in the case of both Hong Kong, Malaysia, and Singapore, they were government-owned resorts that basically were either not developed or were failing, and so they were bringing in what they called industry expertise from the private sector. So I have to say, it depends on what level you're at, but anything from middle management on up, you're probably going in there. It's not your choice. You're happy that you have, been offered the job, and you adjust as you go along. If you can't adjust and basically kind of fly by the seat of your pants on as far as the culture and language and so on, and adjusting, then you probably shouldn't take the job.
Right. Kind of follow-up question to that. Do you need to learn the language for each of the countries you work, or did everyone speak English?
No, everyone did not speak English. My answer to that was, and I would teach this in my classes, that everybody knows what the definition of trilingual is: somebody that speaks 3 languages. Right. And definition of bilingual, you speak 2 languages. 2. Definition of somebody who speaks 1 language is an American. That's what I was, and I tried really mostly in Japan in the early days, but I could get by, but very basic. And something like that. That was in the 80s, so English was not very prominent. In fact, we had 120 some interpreters that were on staff full time. So, but in other cases, right now, I would say I've worked in China, India, Saudi Arabia, Malaysia, Singapore. There's enough English spoken that it's not a problem. It sure is an advantage if you can speak whatever their native language is, or at least get by and order your dinner and know that they're talking about you. Mm-hmm. So it is not, I have to say, I don't want to sound arrogant, but it depends on what level you're at. If you're at, I mean, I was a CEO. I just didn't have time to go to language schools in 6 different countries, 6 different languages. It just it wasn't what they were paying me for. And so it depends on the level. It's certainly an advantage. If I thought I was going to be in Japan for 10 years, I very definitely would study the language. But if I was going to be there for 2 years, if it's an assignment like that, you're in and out. Particularly if it's in the hotel industry, they'll transfer you every 2 or 3 years, and they'll be in half a dozen countries, and in a dozen years, and most people just can't, can't spend the time to learn that. And it's, I hate to say it, but it's probably expected by the host country.
That people move up and you move
they
around.
don't really, especially if you're an American, and I've lived this for 30 years, they don't expect me to know. In fact, it was a surprise. I would surprise them sometimes in Japan, because they really didn't expect me to understand or even be able to read, which I could somewhat. And that's a surprise to them, but it's pretty much the same way right now.
I know you would talk about middle management. So is there really an opportunity for growth and to move within these various organizations if I guess there's an expectation that you're moving around through the various resorts or, hot new thing that's out there?
Well, if the leaders in the industry, if you're looking at leisure, the big companies like Disney and like Universal, and a group out of based in London called Merlin Entertainment, which owns the Lego brand and operates in like 20 some countries. Those companies, if you're working with them, you will be and can be moved around. Sometimes you don't want to, but you would have to, and that's the way that you would get into an international location, is probably through a major company that has operations in other countries, either opening or ongoing, similar to a hotel chain. If you work in a hotel chain, you do have an opportunity to go outside of your area, your host country here. So it's pretty, the big companies in the leisure business, and even the studios like Paramount, MGM, that have operations in all over the world, they can move you around, and they tend to, in my experience, because I've worked with Universal and Disney and Lego and Merlin and Paramount, MGM. I've worked with all of them. The people that start moving, they won't stop. I mean, they'll be in one country and then they'll be in another country, and then because they know whoever management is, they know that person will adapt and be willing to make sacrifices with family or schooling and things like that. So once you get into that routine of moving from country to country, it's been my experience over many companies that I've worked with, is that you will continue to move. They will take advantage of that, and that's a good thing, because that's how you get promoted. Is you're willing to make a bit of a sacrifice. And if you just want to stay home, if I wanted to work at Disneyland a few miles down the road for 40 years, I could have done that. Mm-hmm. And some people are very good at that. I'm not saying that in a negative way. You need some of those people that are very steady, that have the corporate history behind them and the stability. But then there are those that are wanderers, and like I was, but mm-hmm. Each time a little better opportunity and a different adventure.
Yeah, you got to explore the world while with your family. A couple more questions. Did you see uniform standards and protocols for tourism in the various organizations and countries you worked in?
No, I don't think at all. Excuse me. That's one of the adjustments you have to make if you're operating a leisure business, is that and first of all, most of the tourism boards and tourism organizations, they're government, either government funded or government run. And you put those two together, and it's usually not very, very effective, to be honest with you. The standards of as far as tourism and that it just depends on the government, and it goes back and forth. Sometimes they're liberal with letting people in and letting students in on visas and so on, and sometimes they will cut it off almost totally. So I will find the companies that I've been with in foreign countries have all been big and major. And so what happens is that we don't rely on the government tourism organizations, because they a lot of times have to cater to the little guy, the little operator, the little mom and pop leisure attraction or something, because they want to be fair to everybody, and the bigger guys are on their own. So that's one issue that has come up in, I think, every country that I've we work closely with the tourism, but we don't rely on them. Their standards are not our standards.
Mm-hmm.
The recruitment or rather advertising and so on is not the same. They have a different agenda.
Wonderful. Tourism is one of the most taxed sectors. How do you combat that trend?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
How do you combat the trend? Tourism is one of the most taxed sectors. How do you combat the trend?
Most taxed? Is that what?
Yes, taxed. Yes.
Well, it is difficult. My last my full-time position with the Malaysian government was the government themselves wanted to institute a 25% tax on the admissions of any entertainment. I mean, a theater. I mean, a movie theater, show, a theme park, or anything. The only way we got them to hold off on that was the entire there was a leisure association in Malaysia. We all formed together and objected to the government in a very polite way, but we rejected the government. And now I work for the government. I work for the sovereign fund, but the other, the financial part of the government wanted to tax us, the leisure sector of the government, because it was free money for them. But quite simply, it would have driven a lot of us out of business, particularly the small operators that couldn't, and it would have kept capital investment down substantially. And the only way we fought that off was we had every mom and pop little shopping center, entertainment center, down to the major ones. Like I was involved with the $1 billion Lego resort in Malaysia, and we all gathered together and were able to keep them from implementing that tax.
So a lot of advocacy work, making sure everyone was.
But you have to do it together. It just won't be any one company really doesn't have the strength to do that, and they will. The general attitude of most governments is that tourism, they have a lot of money, and the tourist facilities, they make a lot of money, and it's not that difficult to manage it because it's just fun stuff and not very, particularly in the developing areas of leisure, like I mentioned Asia and the Middle East. They think the industry is not a professional, really legitimate industry, and so they tend to look at it that way, as that we're just we're just living off the people, raising our prices and making a lot of money, so why not tax it? But our concern is, as soon as you start doing that, revenues go down.
Right, prices have to go up, and are people willing to pay for that?
Right.
Experience, at the end of the day.
Capital reinvestment will not be there or be cut down severely, and that's I'll give you an example of we had, when I went to Singapore to redevelop a resort island. Had been there for 30 years, and it never made any money, subsidized by the government, and there wasn't much on the island, but it cost you $15 to get onto the island, $15 per person.
Wow.
And they had about 2 million visitors a year. And one of the first things I did was lower the admission fee to $2 from 15 to $2. Well, and of course the attendance went up to almost 20 million. So you do the math on that, and the government that was running it thought that $15, well, we weren't making any money, so we better charge more and more.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the solution. It was to charge less and get more people in there, get volume. That's what we needed. And that brought in more tourism also.
Yeah, you could grow your experience, as more revenues coming in.
If you have 2 million people in a 1,000-acre resort, and then 5 or 6 years later, you have 20 million people coming into a 1,000-acre resort. There are a whole lot of other people making money, not
Right.
just us,
Right.
not just from an admission, but the retailers. We had 15 hotels. They were all doing well. Occupancy was 70-80%. And everybody was doing better. And so the government just backed off. They didn't want to, we had no taxes, none whatsoever. So
It's wonderful. And then also it helps out the community where these resorts are being hosted. It just builds that community up as well.
Yeah.
The people that live there, because you're offering them jobs as well.
Well, we went from about 2,000 jobs to probably over 10,000.
Wow.
Jobs. And that was a lot of people that had good jobs and enjoyed it, and a lot of private businesses, because you get 20 million people funneling through this island. Everybody's making a lot of money, and so they were very pleased with it. And your reputation and support among the community also grows, which is really important.
Wonderful. So, congratulations. You have over 40 years of career experience in the world's most successful leisure companies, destination resorts, global events. What has kept you in the tourism and leisure sector, and what has been the greatest reward?
Well, what's kept me in it is I don't know what else I would do. I couldn't dress like this if I worked for a bank, right?
Right.
Right.
Love the Hawaiian shirt.
People are good. Friends we have friends all over the world. There aren't many major places that I can travel to and not be able to call somebody that I know and have worked with and say, hey, do you mind if we come out and visit your place or stay in your hotel or something like that? It's the type of people, and like I said, Disney has a hiring philosophy, and like I said, Disney was my basic training, and I could sit there and interview somebody and not understand a word they're saying, and know whether they would fit in our company or not. In fact, I'll use this as an example, is that my first month or so in Tokyo, I didn't speak hardly any Japanese. We were interviewing for the Tokyo Disney ambassador, who would travel around and promote Tokyo Disneyland and so on. We must have had 25 or 30 applicants. I didn't speak any Japanese at all. The interviews were all in Japanese with our Japanese counterparts. We narrowed it down to three finalists, and I had 2 of 3 finalists were the same ones as our Japanese interviewers did. And I didn't understand a word they were saying. So that's the type of people you're looking for in the industry. When you work with those kind of people, you don't want to go back behind a desk wearing a suit.
Right.
It just isn't what I would do. And during the Olympics here in LA, the major companies, they would donate or volunteer executives for a year, maybe 2 years, to help build the Olympics and so on. Major companies would do that. And I worked with a lot of them. They were good people. But let me tell you, after a year or two working with the Olympics, they didn't want to go back. It was a different industry. They just didn't want to go back. Several of them that I know and still know didn't go back. They didn't go back to their bank or their oil company or whatever it is, because they just enjoyed the industry, and that it tends to keep you in the industry, and you won't leave. You can't imagine having more fun somewhere else.
Definitely. You enjoy that leisure, activity and just the people, they're excited to be there and welcome and host people, which is great experience. Switching gears a little bit, we're still living through a pandemic. Seems like the pandemic had such an impact on the tourism and leisure industry. From your experience, can you share a couple of bright spots now that tourism is beginning to open up that makes you hopeful?
Right. It is now. I think we will see a good first quarter here this year. The facilities are starting to open. Hotels are starting to do a lot better. I mean, we're running. If you were running 20 or 30% for a while, occupancy, you're probably lucky. So they've had a rough time, and there's a pent up demand for it. We're seeing that in all the resorts. I'm on the board of directors of the International Association. We're in over 100 countries, and we get monthly reports and from people that are in that country, and most countries are beginning to look up now. Occupancies in hotels are going up. Attendance in various leisure facilities are going up. What they're finding is that people, it's still not back to pre-pandemic levels. People are spending more money. The per person, per capita spending, because it's that pent up demand, they're spending more money now. And so with fewer people, you're able to get better profits. And that's why even the first quarter here, when attendance and occupancies are not up to normal, profits can be, because the people are spending more money because they haven't had a chance to do it for so long. So I'm very optimistic with this recovery. It's been 2 years. It's terrible. I went through there was a SARS epidemic when I first got to Singapore, which shut down Singapore totally. We went from having what was it, 10 million visitors to having like almost nothing. It was cut off. And it was cut off for several months, but it recovered as soon as you opened the gates. It recovered very, very quickly, very quickly. And that was only about 6 or 7 months worth. But so I expect the same out of this. It's been 2 years, and even more frustrated people that want to get out there and give us their money.
Yeah, take a vacation. I mean, because of the pandemic, many of these resorts, destinations laid off a lot of people, and they took hits on their revenue. From your experience and observations, what are the biggest lessons learned to these companies? And I think you just answered it right now. Do you believe tourism will ever fully recover and stabilize?
Well, to answer it in reverse, I think tourism will more than recover. I think it will. It is that pent up demand and people, and in a lot of cases they've been saving money because they haven't. Right. Haven't spent the money that they normally would. So I expect that to be extremely healthy. What was the first part of the question? I forgot.
How everyone had to lay off their staff, and what were their biggest lessons learned?
Well, I don't know that they could have done it any differently. As I said, we had a board meeting about 2 months ago with the International Association of Resorts and that, and we asked the same question, and we go around the boardroom and say, what did we learn? What did you learn in Europe? What did you learn in Asia? And so on. And it's basically that they would probably have to do the same thing again if it ever got that worse, is that the the larger companies could lay off for a lot longer than the small companies could. Some of them were able to still give benefits, and that's a good thing. Big companies are good employers, like the Disneys and Universals and that. The big ones that could afford it would say, even though they laid them off, they kept them on benefits, because it didn't just affect the employee, it was affecting their whole family. And
Right.
that's terrible. So they did maintain that, and the feeling was that there was actually increased loyalty in some of those countries or companies, because of the way they treated the layoff. That they treated it as humanely as they could and could afford. So if anything, I think that would be, from a major company standpoint, a lesson to be learned, that it may hurt to keep those benefits on, or to keep the person on a half salary for a while, but the benefit will be returned by a long-term loyal employee base.
Definitely. I know. So you've talked about, you're part of the International Association of Amusement Parks and Attractions. Can you talk a little bit about belonging to professional orgs and networking, and how important it is to, build those networks and put yourself out there and build that support system to advance your career?
Well, that's probably the most important thing that you could do outside of doing a good job for your, for your company. I have always recommended, in a lot of companies, if I have had people come up to me when I'm new in a company and say, well, I've been asked to give a speech to, maybe he's an architect or an engineer, to give a speech to their local group and so on. I'll do it on my lunch hour, so I won't be away from work. And I say, you got to be kidding. That's part of your job, is you're out there promoting the company, promoting yourself as a part of the company, representing the company. To me, it's extremely important, and I will pay people to do that. And that's what I told them. If you're in finance, then you talk to your financial
Director.
Yeah, whatever. Everybody has a specialty there, and they should be out there doing that. So the networking is extremely important to me. However, some companies, and I know one in particular, a major one that I won't mention, they don't like people, their staff, their management going out and doing that kind of networking, because they're afraid they're going to be offered another job, and which is true. But you can't, if you're good to your employees, you can't protect them. That's not good. They'll know that. So there are a few companies that don't encourage that. As a matter of fact, when I was working for Disney, they did not let us go to the association that I'm on the board of directors and was chair of. They didn't allow that. I never went to it when I was with Disney. They have an annual conference of 35, 40,000 people. That's good networking opportunity.
Right.
I never went to it until I quit Disney. And then I began networking, which I should have. Now, Disney has totally changed now. They actually, a couple of years ago, a Disney employee was a chairman of the association, and they've kind of come to realize it, I guess, and they promote that. They're very active, and they contribute to the industry. And I think whoever asked that question, I'd highly recommend, whatever your specialty is right now. If you're kind of in middle management, you probably have a specialty. Start networking in those associations and so on. Hopefully you're representing your company, not just yourself. You're representing your company, and hopefully that will be supported.
Wonderful. So I know we're up against time, but I have a couple more questions that came in. How did you learn your leadership skills? You retired as a top executive at organizations that are household names. What helped you advance in your career and stay marketable to these top employers?
Well, one thing I learned early on is I always try to hire people smarter than I am. And of course, my wife says that's not a problem. People have them smarter than, but that's the truth. It may sound kind of silly, but I always try to get people that I hire them for the next position, not for the one they're interviewing for. You see opportunity in there. You see somebody that you think, oh boy, I wish I knew more, as much about marketing as she does, and then you hire that person because their number one goal is going to make me look good. They make me look good by doing their job really well. So right. That's really been that and simply sacrifice. You have to sacrifice family time. You have to travel and miss birthdays. And I missed my son's first Christmas. That was kind of lousy, but you have to be willing to sacrifice, and you have to be confident in yourself and know that you may hire somebody that's promoted over you someday. Never happened, but it could. It could. I'm not done yet. So
that's what I was going to ask, with you being in the position you are as a top executive, what was that family life balance?
Well, because I was in this industry, it was pretty easy because it's mostly family oriented. I took my family if I went on a business trip, I was probably visiting resorts or in hotels, and if the kids could get out of school, I would take them. If we had special event, I probably 2 or 3 times a week, I would have to have some kind of evening activity of some type, and if it was appropriate, I would certainly have my wife join me. And if it's a daytime event, it was usually my kids were joining me, and that's the nature of the industry, and and that's why you tend to limit the family sacrifice, because you're taking your kids on trips, and you're taking your spouse out to dinner or out to a reception, and she or he is part of they're part of the company, they're part of the package, and you should look at it that way.
That's wonderful. So two questions to wrap out. So in retirement now, are you able to visit the parks and resorts where you worked? And with all your experience behind the scenes, what do you look for when you plan your vacations?
Well, when we plan a vacation, last year was my 50th anniversary, my wife and I, and our vacation was planned to do nothing and go nowhere. And we've been there, done that, and I still do some consulting a bit, and I try to keep it down. And as I said before, I was teaching in Singapore for before the pandemic, and spent summers in Singapore. So we try to keep our travel to a minimum, and we live in a nice area with nice weather, and we're happy.
Wonderful. So to finish off, again, thank you so much for joining us for our chat today. Any final thoughts and observations or words of wisdom that you would like to share with our current students and our alumni that are watching or will be watching the recording later on?
No, I think I'm talking to a good group, because they're ready to get their bachelor's degree, or they're in graduate school, or they've already graduated, and they're hopefully in management, entry or middle management somewhere. So they're on their way. Just remember to if you're in this business, you're in the people business, and just make sure you try to hire people smarter than you, and you'll be on your way. It may take a few years, but a little bit of sacrifice and a lot of fun along the way, and you'll enjoy it. You will never leave this industry once you get in it. You just won't.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for joining us today. And before we go, if anyone wants to connect with you, I believe you are on LinkedIn. Are you okay if they befriend you on LinkedIn and try to connect with you, or they could always email us and we'll connect you via email as well.
I'm fine with it. If they would mention this, it would help.
Chat, yes.
I do get a lot that I people I've never heard of, and if there's no real professional
connection.
No connection, I might ignore it. So if they mention this, that's fine. I'd love to do it.
Wonderful. Darrell, thank you so much again for giving of your time and sharing your expertise in this wonderful industry that's definitely growing, and we are very happy to be a part of. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Please visit our website to learn about our future chats and follow us on social media. We thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed